A world-famous Harvard professor laughed as he called a math problem impossible. But he didn't know the one person on Earth who could solve it was his janitor. For months, she risked her only job, secretly writing the solution that had stumped geniuses for 50 years. But when she finally stood up to share it, the professor publicly humiliated her, telling her to stick to her mops. What that arrogant professor didn't know was that he had just sealed his own fate. The smell of old paper and chalk dust was a comfort to Elena Rivera. It was the scent of knowledge, a perfume she couldn't find anywhere else in her life. At 27, her world was divided into two parts, like the two sides of a coin. By day, she was the devoted daughter to her aging father, Frank, in their small but spotless apartment. They had a comfortable rhythm. She would make him coffee in the morning, and he would tell her stories about his days as a mechanic, talking about engines like they were living things with their own puzzles to solve. Everything has a system, Mija, he'd say, stirring his coffee. You just have to be patient enough to see it. He saw that same patience in her, but he didn't know the full extent of where she applied it. By night, she wore the simple gray uniform of a janitor and pushed a heavy cart through the silent, grand halls of Harvard University's mathematics department. Here, she was invisible. That was the other side of her coin. Wealthy students, buzzing with ambition, and brilliant professors, lost in their own worlds of complex thought, walked past her without a glance. She was a ghost in their machine, a function, not a person. One time, a hurried student dropped his half-full latte. It splashed all over the polished floor. He cursed, looked at the mess, then looked right through Elena as if she were a piece of furniture, and walked away, expecting the mess to simply vanish. Elena just calmly wheeled her cart over and began wiping it clean. She didn't feel anger, just a quiet resignation. This was her place in this world. But Elena saw everything. Her clear, kind eyes missed nothing. She had wavy dark hair that she always tied back simply, and a natural, quiet beauty that went unnoticed in the sea of expensive clothes and confident strides. She had a secret that she kept locked away inside her. In the quietest hours of her shift, when the only sound was the hum of the building's heating, she would find treasures others threw away, discarded textbooks with broken spines, old lecture notes left on desks, and problem sets tossed in the trash. During her break, tucked away in a small supply closet in the basement, she would read. She didn't just read the words, she understood the numbers. The equations felt like a beautiful, intricate language to her, a secret code that explained the very fabric of the world. She had never been to college, but she had a mind that saw the systems her father talked about, the patterns and logic that others missed. Her love for numbers was a quiet, burning fire within her, a private joy in a life of being overlooked. One Tuesday night, Elena was mopping the floor at the back of a vast lecture hall. A famous professor, Dr. Alden Pierce, was giving a late-night talk to a small, select group of graduate students. He was a man with a booming voice and an ego that filled the room long before he did. He had won the Fields Medal, the highest honor in mathematics, and he wore that achievement like a crown, expecting everyone to bow. Elena listened as she worked, her movements slow and silent. Professor Pierce pointed dramatically to a complex equation scrawled across the massive blackboard. The Vilenko conjecture, he announced, his voice dripping with condescending authority. For 50 years, the greatest minds have thrown themselves against this wall. They have all failed. It is, for all practical purposes, an intellectual Everest we were not meant to climb. It's impossible. He let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that wasn't meant to be funny but to put everyone else in their place. Some problems are just too big for us. A humbling reminder of our limits. The students scribbled notes furiously, looking at him with a kind of fearful awe. But Elena just stared at the blackboard. The long string of symbols didn't look impossible to her. It didn't look like a wall. It looked like a puzzle. A beautiful, complicated puzzle waiting for the right key. As she wiped down the last desk and turned off the lights, a thought, small but powerful, took root in her mind and refused to let go. What if he's wrong? What if the problem isn't the mountain? What if the problem is the path everyone is taking to climb it? What if I could try? The Vilenko conjecture became Elena's shadow. It followed her home, it sat with her at the dinner table, and it filled her dreams. She copied the problem from a photo she had secretly taken of the blackboard onto a precious piece of clean paper. It lived in the pocket of her uniform during the day and on her small kitchen table at night. Her life now had a single, clear purpose. Her work at Harvard was no longer just a job, it was a research opportunity. The empty offices and silent halls became her university, the ghost of lectures past her teachers. During her breaks, she didn't just rest. She found a forgotten storage closet in the basement, a small windowless space that smelled of lemon-scented cleaning fluid and old mops. That closet became her sanctuary. Sitting on an overturned bucket, with a single bare bolt buzzing overhead, she would spread her papers on a flattened cardboard box. She scribbled equations, tested theories, and filled page after page with her unique, intuitive way of seeing the numbers. The world of elite mathematics was happening in the grand rooms above her, but the real, groundbreaking work was happening in the basement, in secret. The world above, however, often reminded her of her place. One evening, as she was cleaning a common area, she overheard a group of students talking. One of them, a particularly entitled and sharp-tongued young woman named Victoria Shaw, laughed loudly. "Can you imagine having to clean up after people for a living? My mother says if I don't get my doctorate, I'll end up like one of them." Her friends giggled. Elena felt a hot sting of shame. She pulled her cart into the shadows and waited for them to pass, her hands clenched tight around the handle. Later that night, Victoria, rushing out of a classroom, nearly ran into Elena's cart. "Excuse you," Victoria snapped, not as an apology but as a command. "Get this thing out of the way." She didn't even look at Elena's face. The words hurt, but they also added fuel to her quiet fire. She would show them. Not with words, but with proof. One night, her secret almost came to an end. A late-working security guard was doing his rounds in the basement. He heard the faint scratching of her pencil on paper coming from the storage closet. "Hello," he called out, his footsteps stopping right outside the door. "Anybody in there?" Elena's heart leaped into her throat. She sat frozen, not daring to breathe. She heard the doorknob jiggle. Luckily, it was old and stuck. The guard grumbled, rapped his knuckles on the door once, and then moved on. Elena waited a full 5 minutes, her body trembling, before she let out a shaky breath. It was a close call, a reminder of how fragile her secret world was. Her father saw the intensity in her. He noticed she was using every scrap of paper she could find, old receipts, the backs of envelopes, paper napkins. She was building mountains of messy but brilliant work. One evening, when she came home, so tired her bones ached but with her mind still buzzing with equations, he had a gift for her. It was a simple, second-hand notebook with a plain black cover. "I saw this at the thrift store," he said, placing it in her hands. His own hands were calloused and stained with a lifetime of grease and oil, but his touch was gentle. "When I was fixing a tricky engine, I had to write everything down. Diagrams. Ideas. It helps you see the whole picture." He tapped the notebook. "This is for your math. Give your ideas a proper home." Elena's eyes filled with tears. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. It was more than just a notebook, it was a sign that someone saw her, that her secret passion was real and important. She hugged her father tightly. "Thank you, Papa." That night, she carefully and neatly copied the Vilenko conjecture onto the first clean page. Her secret study couldn't last forever. Late one night, a kind professor named Dr. Maylin was working late in her office. She was a brilliant mathematician herself, but she carried her brilliance with grace, not arrogance. On her way out, she heard that same small scratching sound coming from the basement storage closet. Thinking it was a pest, she cautiously opened the door, which had been left ajar by Elena. Instead of a mouse, she found Elena surrounded by papers filled with dense mathematics, a pencil flying across the page under the dim light. Elena froze, a deer in the headlights, her face a mask of pure terror. She thought she was about to be fired. She started to stammer an apology, scrambling to gather her precious papers. But Dr. Lin didn't scold her. She just looked at her with wide, curious eyes. "What are you working on?" she asked gently, her gaze falling on the open notebook. Elena hesitated, then shyly pushed the notebook forward. Dr. Lin picked it up. She looked at the first page, then the second. Her eyebrows raised. She flipped through more pages, her expression changing from curiosity to surprise and then to pure, undisguised shock. She looked from the complex equations back to the young janitor in the simple gray uniform. "My goodness," Dr. Lin whispered, her voice full of wonder. "Who are you?" Dr. Maylin saw something in Elena's chaotic notes that no one else had ever seen. Raw, untrained, explosive genius. It was like discovering an uncut diamond in a coal mine. She didn't see a janitor. She saw a mathematician with a perspective so unique it could change the field. She knew she had to help. They began to meet in secret. After Elena's shift ended, in the quiet, early hours of the morning before the campus woke up, they would sit in Dr. Lin's office, the room smelling of coffee and possibility. Dr. Lin became Elena's mentor. She didn't just teach, she guided. She gave her books on formal proof theory, taught her the precise language of academic mathematics, and most importantly, she challenged her ideas, pushing her to defend her unconventional leaps of logic. Your approach is very intuitive, Elena, she would say, tapping a page of the notebook. Most mathematicians build a ladder, step by step. You seem to be able to see the top of the building and simply jump. Now our job is to build the ladder beneath you so others can follow. A deep bond formed between the two women. Dr. Lin, who had fought her own battles as a woman in a male-dominated field, saw a reflection of her own fighting spirit in Elena. She saw the same passion that had driven her. But Elena was constantly walking on eggshells. Dr. Lin, if Professor Pierce finds out, if anyone in administration finds out. I will lose this job, she said one morning, her voice shaking. It's all my father and I have. This job pays for our apartment, our food. We will be careful, Dr. Lin promised, her voice firm with a protective warmth. Talent like yours is a rare gift to the world. We will not let it be snuffed out by bureaucracy or prejudice. We will protect it. Professor Pierce, meanwhile, remained a storm cloud of arrogance patrolling the halls. He would sometimes see Dr. Lin and Elena talking. He'd give Elena a dismissive look, a barely perceptible sneer, as if wondering why a respected professor was wasting her time with the cleaning staff. One day he stopped Dr. Lin in the hallway. May, he said, his tone patronizing, I hope you aren't letting your charitable impulses distract from your real work. He glanced towards where Elena was mopping. Dr. Lin just gave him a cool smile. All my work is real, Alden. You'd be surprised what you can learn if you're willing to look in unexpected places. He just scoffed and walked away, completely blind to the revolution happening right under his nose. Under Dr. Lin's guidance, Elena's work on the Vilenko conjecture grew stronger, more rigorous. Her messy notes began to transform into a solid, logical argument. One morning after Elena had worked through the night on a particularly difficult section, Dr. Lin looked at the new pages with wide, stunned eyes. Elena, she said, her voice filled with a tremor of excitement. I think you've done it. I think this is the core of the solution. You need to write a formal draft. Elena's heart pounded in her chest so hard she thought it would break. A formal solution? Her? The doubt she had fought for so long came rushing back like a tidal wave. I can't, she whispered, looking down at her worn work shoes. I'm nobody. I don't have the words. They will laugh at me. That evening she told her father what Dr. Lin had suggested. She confessed all her fears, her feeling of being an imposter in a world she didn't belong to. Her father listened patiently, letting her pour out all her anxiety. When she was finished, he took her hand. His hands were rough from a lifetime of fixing things, but his touch was the gentlest thing she knew. Mija, he said, looking her straight in the eye with a gaze that was both loving and fierce. Listen to me. A doctor doesn't own health. A farmer doesn't own the land. And a professor, even a famous one, does not own the truth. He squeezed her hand. Truth belongs to everyone, Mija. It belongs to anyone brave enough to go looking for it. You went looking. You found something beautiful. Now don't you dare be afraid to show them what you found. His simple, powerful words were the steel she needed for her spine. She went back to her notebook and, with trembling hands, began to write. The true breakthrough, the lightning strike moment, came on a cold Thursday night in her little basement closet. Elena was staring at a line of her own proof, something she had gone over 100 times. It felt right, but there was still a missing piece. Frustrated, she looked back at the original conjecture, the 50-year-old foundation of the problem. And then she saw it. It wasn't a complex new addition she needed. It was a simple, elegant, devastating flaw in the original assumption everyone had built their work on. For half a century, the world's greatest mathematicians had been trying to build a bridge across a canyon, but no one had thought to check if the ground on either side was solid. Elena realized one side was sand. The problem wasn't insoluble, the question itself was flawed. She gasped, dropping her pencil. It was so simple, so obvious, she couldn't believe no one had ever seen it. She ran, her heart hammering against her ribs, her precious notebook clutched in her hand. She flew up the basement stairs and ran down the hall to Dr. Lin's office. She didn't even knock, just burst in, breathless, her eyes wide with discovery. Dr. Lin looked up, startled. Elena wordlessly held out the notebook. Dr. Lin took one look at the new equation, the one that exposed the fundamental flaw, and her jaw dropped. She checked the logic, her mind racing, tracing the steps back. It was sound. It was brilliant. It was undeniable. Elena, this is it, Dr. Lin breathed, her voice filled with awe. This is more than a draft. This is a proof. A complete one. She looked at Elena, her eyes shining with pride and excitement. You have to present this. At the Harvard Math Symposium. The symposium was the most elite event of the academic year. It was a place for world-famous mathematicians to share their work with professors, wealthy donors, and the brightest graduate students. The idea of standing in front of that crowd made Elena feel sick with fear. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "They'll never let me. I'm not a student. I'm not a professor. I'm a janitor. They will tear me apart." Dr. Lin was a force of nature. "Let them try," she said fiercely. She went to the head of the department, bypassing Pierce. She argued that a potential solution to the Vilenko conjecture was too important to be ignored, no matter who it came from. Word of the janitor's proof began to spread like wildfire through the department, a mix of scandalous rumor and thrilling possibility. It reached Professor Pierce. He was beyond furious. He saw it as a personal insult, a stunt designed to mock him. He cornered Elena one afternoon as she was cleaning a hallway. Several students were nearby, including Victoria Shaw, who watched with a smug, cruel smile on her face. "I hear you've been playing with numbers," Pierce sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. He looked down at her gray uniform, then back at her face. "Let me give you some advice. Some people are born to think, and some people are born to clean. You are embarrassing yourself and this institution. You should stick to your mops and buckets and leave the real work to the professionals. This fantasy of yours is over." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. The student snickered. Her face burned with a deep, painful humiliation. All her newfound confidence crumbled into dust. She fled, dropping her sponge into the bucket with a splash, tears blurring her vision as she ran down the hall. That night, she told Dr. Lin and her father that she was backing out. "He's right," she sobbed, curled up on her small sofa. "Who am I to stand on that stage? I'm just a silly girl who cleans their floors." Dr. Lin put a hand on her shoulder. "He is an arrogant, frightened man, Elena. He's not afraid you're wrong, he's terrified you're right. This isn't about him, it's about the math." Her father knelt in front of her. "Mija, all your life, people have looked past you. They saw a uniform, not a person. Tomorrow you have a chance to make them see. Not for revenge. Never for revenge. But for yourself and for the truth you found. Stand tall and show them who Elena Rivera is." His words, combined with Dr. Lin's steady support, slowly rebuilt her shattered courage. She took a deep, shuddering breath, wiped her tears, and nodded. She would do it. So many of us have faced comments like that at work, little digs meant to put us in our place. It's a painful experience. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever had to deal with someone trying to make you feel small just for doing your job. Your story matters. The day of the symposium arrived, heavy with a thick, electric tension. The air in Harvard's grandest lecture hall, a cathedral of knowledge with its dark wood and towering stained glass windows, was thick with the low hum of important conversations and expensive cologne. The room was a sea of the most respected mathematicians in the world, wealthy university donors in perfectly tailored suits, and a hungry pack of brilliant graduate students. Into this world of privilege and prestige walked Elena Rivera. She wasn't wearing her janitor's uniform. Her father had taken a small part of his savings and bought her a simple but elegant dark blue dress from a department store. Her wavy dark hair was down, framing a face that was now determined, though her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a single, quiet note in a loud, complicated symphony. As she entered, a wave of whispers followed her, rippling through the crowd. "Is that her? The janitor? They're actually letting her present?" People stared openly, their curiosity mixed with condescension and disbelief. Elena took a deep breath, picturing her father's proud face. "Stand tall, Mija." She kept her head held high, her gaze fixed forward, and walked to the seat Dr. Lin had saved for her. Victoria Shaw, the entitled TA, was standing near the front, holding a leather-bound portfolio. She saw Elena and gave a theatrical, disbelieving laugh to her friend, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I can't believe they're letting this happen. Is this some kind of diversity stunt? It's utterly embarrassing for the department." Professor Alden Pierce walked to the podium to begin the symposium, radiating self-importance. He acted as if Elena didn't exist, his eyes scanning the powerful faces in the front rows. "Welcome," he began, his voice booming with false warmth. He spoke about the challenges of modern mathematics and, with a deeply patronizing tone, he mentioned the Vilenko conjecture. "It remains," he said dramatically, pausing for effect, "one of those beautiful, impossible peaks we may never conquer. A testament to the humility we must all possess." He was about to introduce the first scheduled speaker when a clear, calm voice cut through the room. "Excuse me, Professor Pierce." All heads turned. Dr. Maylin was on her feet, her posture poised and unshakable. The room fell silent. "Before we begin," Dr. Lin continued, her voice steady and strong, projecting to the back of the hall, "I believe we have someone here today with a significant breakthrough regarding the Vilenko conjecture." There was a collective gasp in the hall. The air crackled. Pierce looked at her, his face flushing a deep, angry red. He knew exactly who she was talking about. He tried to shut it down. Dr. Lin, this is hardly the time or the place for speculative work from unvetted sources. But the seed had been planted. The crowd was already buzzing with excitement. The idea of a new solution, any solution, was too tantalizing. Let's hear it, a gruff voice shouted from the back. Others joined in. Pierce was trapped by his own audience. He shot a look of pure poison at Elena, who was standing frozen by her seat. He couldn't refuse without looking like a weak and fearful gatekeeper. With a look of utter disgust, he waved a dismissive hand towards the stage. Very well, he said through gritted teeth, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The stage is yours. You have 5 minutes. And only 5 minutes. With every eye in that massive hall on her, Elena Rivera took a deep, shaky breath and began the long, lonely walk to the stage. Elena stepped up to the podium, the dark wood cool beneath her trembling fingers. The bright stage lights were blinding, turning the audience into a dark, faceless sea. She could feel the weight of hundreds of skeptical eyes on her. Her voice trembled as she spoke her first words into the microphone. Good afternoon, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and started again, a little stronger this time. My name is Elena Rivera. She paused, taking a breath and thinking of her father's words. Stand tall. For the last 2 years I have worked as a janitor in this building. Every night, I clean the blackboards that you all use. And over time I have grown to love the language written on them. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Professor Pierce crossed his arms, tapping his foot impatiently, a sneer fixed on his lips. Elena ignored him. She turned to the large, clean blackboard behind her. She picked up a piece of chalk. The familiar feel of it in her hand, its dusty, solid weight, was an anchor. It was her tool. She was comfortable here. She began to explain her approach. She didn't use the dense, academic jargon that others would use. She spoke simply from the heart, as if she were explaining it to her father. She explained how she saw the problem not as a wall to be broken through, but as a tangled knot of yarn to be gently, patiently undone. The room, which had been filled with rustling papers and quiet coughs, slowly went utterly silent. As she wrote the first few lines of her proof on the board, the mood in the room began to pivot. The mathematicians leaned forward, their professional curiosity overriding their personal prejudice. They weren't looking at a janitor anymore. They were looking at the math. A quiet whisper started among the distinguished faculty in the front row. Her dimensional mapping, it's unorthodox. A colleague next to him whispered back, unorthodox, yes, but look, it's clean. It's working. Sam Patel, the young grad student who had always been kind to her, sat on the very edge of his seat, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with excitement. He was nodding along, seeing the pure, breathtaking genius in her simple logic. Dr. Lin, standing at the side of the room, beamed with a fierce, maternal pride, her eyes glistening. Elena reached the key part of her argument, the simple, hidden flaw. As she explained how a foundational assumption was unstable, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. She's right. My God, it's been there the whole time. How did we all miss that? Professor Pierce could not stand it. He saw his 50-year-old impossible problem being dismantled by a cleaning woman with a piece of chalk. He saw his own authority, his entire legacy, evaporating in front of his eyes. He stormed forward. This is highly speculative, he interrupted, his voice booming with anger and desperation. Her methods lack formal rigor. This is nothing more than amateur guesswork. It's an insult to this symposium. Before Elena could even react, an older, highly respected professor from MIT, a man whose work Pierce himself revered, stood up. Alden, be quiet, he said, his voice like thunder. The entire room was shocked into silence. The old professor looked at his colleagues. Let her finish, they demanded in a chorus of powerful voices. Utterly humiliated, Pierce stepped back, his face a mask of rage and defeat. Elena turned back to the board. With newfound confidence, her hand no longer shaking, she wrote the final, beautiful lines of her proof. She drew a simple, elegant equation that tied everything together, proving the dimensional flaw with such clarity that it was impossible to deny. She put the chalk down in the tray, creating a soft click that echoed in the silent hall. The proof was complete. For a long, breathless moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then a single person began to clap. It was Sam Patel. Then Dr. Lin joined in. Then the old professor from MIT. Within seconds, the entire hall erupted in a tidal wave of thunderous, sustained applause. Professors, students, and donors were all on their feet, cheering not for a janitor, but for a giant slayer. Professor Pierce stood frozen, his face ashen, a monument to his own arrogance. Elena looked out at the sea of faces at the standing ovation, and tears began to stream down her face. They were not tears of revenge. They were tears of relief, of joy, of a quiet woman who had finally shown the world the truth she had carried inside her for so long. The applause from the symposium was only the beginning. It set off an earthquake in the academic world. In the days that followed, Harvard was in a state of controlled chaos. Dean Howard, the measured and thoughtful head of the university, immediately convened a special emergency committee of top mathematicians from Harvard, MIT, and Princeton to rigorously verify Elena's proof. They worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and sheer excitement, checking every line of her logic. The verdict came back in less than a week, delivered with a sense of awe. It was flawless, elegant, and revolutionary. Elena Rivera had solved the Vilenko conjecture. The news exploded. It was picked up by national and international press outlets. The story was a fairy tale for the modern age. Headlines read, "Harvard janitor solves impossible math problem," and "The simple woman who shocked the ivory tower." Elena, who had spent her life trying to be invisible, was suddenly one of the most famous women in the world. Dean Howard called her into his huge, impressive office, the walls lined with books and portraits of past deans. Elena was nervous, but the dean smiled warmly and gestured for her to sit. "Miss Rivera," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration, "what you have done is extraordinary. It is a powerful and, frankly, a much-needed reminder that genius is not confined to our classrooms or our admissions process. It can be found anywhere." He leaned forward. "Harvard would be honored to offer you a full academic scholarship, effective immediately, in any department you choose. Furthermore, we would like to create a new salaried position for you as a special research assistant in the mathematics department, so you can continue your groundbreaking work with Dr. Lin." The consequences for Professor Pierce were swift but quiet. He was not fired; that would have drawn more scandal. Instead, he was forced to step down from his leadership of the symposium and several other prestigious committees. His public humiliation was a punishment far worse than being let go. He was a great mind who had been undone by his own monumental arrogance, and he became a ghost in the halls he once ruled. One afternoon, as Elena was walking to Dr. Lin's office, Victoria Shaw approached her, looking uncomfortable. The entitled TA couldn't quite meet Elena's eyes. I saw the news," Victoria mumbled, twisting a strap on her expensive bag. "I wanted to apologize for how I acted. It was out of line." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a crack in a lifetime of entitlement. Elena just nodded, accepting the small offering, and continued on her way. A more genuine offer of friendship came from Sam Patel, the bright young grad student. He ran up to her near the library, his face beaming with genuine excitement. "Your proof was beautiful," he said. "Just so elegant. The way you handled the dimensional phasing was brilliant. I was wondering, really, I'd be honored if you would ever consider collaborating on some future work. I think we could do some amazing things." For the first time, someone in this world was asking for her help, seeing her not as a curiosity but as a true peer. Elena smiled, a real happy smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that very much, Sam," she said. Elena's life found a new beautiful rhythm. She made a choice that surprised everyone at Harvard. She didn't immediately quit her janitor job. She decided to split her time, creating a life that honored both where she came from and where she was going. By day, she was a math researcher and student. She worked alongside Dr. Lin, exploring the new frontiers her own proof had opened up. She attended classes, no longer an outsider looking in, but a respected student who classmates turned to for help. She loved the feeling of sitting in a lecture and being able to raise her hand and ask a question. But at night, 2 or 3 times a week, she still put on the simple gray uniform and pushed her cart through the now friendly halls. It kept her grounded. It was a powerful reminder of the quiet, dusty closet where her dream took flight. It was her way of telling herself and the world that there is dignity in all work. She didn't forget the community she came from. On Saturdays, she started a small, free math club for young girls from her neighborhood. In a sunny room at the local library, she would show them that numbers weren't scary or boring. "Math is just a language," she would tell them, her voice patient and kind as she drew shapes on a whiteboard. "It's a way to tell the story of how things work. From a video game to a star, it's all a story told in numbers. And it's a language that everyone can learn to speak." She saw the spark in their eyes, the same spark she once had, and she promised herself she would help fan it into a flame. Inspired by her story and her character, Harvard University launched a new, multi-million-dollar initiative, the Elena Rivera Outreach Program. It was designed to find and support talented students in underserved high schools, ensuring that no genius would be overlooked just because they didn't have the right zip code or fancy pedigree. The closing scene of her old life became the opening of her new one. Elena walked through the halls of the math department carrying a stack of books. But now she wasn't invisible. Professors would nod respectfully as she passed. "Good morning, Elena," they'd say with genuine warmth. Students would stop her to ask questions, not about cleaning supplies, but about abstract algebra. She was no longer just the janitor. She was a mathematician. She had earned her place not with a degree, but with courage, passion, and a love for the beautiful truth of numbers. As she walked toward the light of a new day, she thought to herself, truth belongs to those who seek it, no matter who they are. Miles away, in a small, quiet apartment, her father, Frank, was standing in his living room. He wasn't just looking at the framed newspaper article on the wall anymore. He was holding a new frame. And it was the official university letter, formally appointing his daughter as a research fellow. He hung it right next to the newspaper clipping that read, Harvard's most unexpected genius. He stepped back and looked at them both. He heard Elena's keys in the door and turned, a long, slow, proud smile spreading across his face. His daughter had not just solved a math problem. She had reminded the world that the most brilliant minds and the most courageous hearts can be found in the most humble of places. Stories like Elena's remind us that heroes are all around us, often in plain sight. If her journey inspired you, you might enjoy other stories of underdogs who changed the world. We've put together a playlist of our best underdog stories, which you can find linked in the comments below. Thank you for watching.